5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Do you think she actually wants to be president? Because I'm not sure Joe's going to make it to November.
I'm not sure if he's going to make it through this day. There was this guy, Harry Brown. He was a libertarian here. He's passed away now, but he said the government is good at doing one thing. They will break your legs and then give you a crutch.
The Clinton Foundation was nuts deep in Haiti, weren't they? In
Yes.
the relief effort.
I think the only person that was getting relief was Bill Clinton on the side.
Hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa. It's Amish Inquisition time yet again on Sunday, 17th of May, episode 132. I'm Amish Phil.
I'm Amish Ben.
And I'm Amish Matt.
And this week we've got a special guest joining us on Zoom, the host of the Oddcast featuring the Odd Man Out. The Odd Man Out, how are you?
Hello, thanks guys for having me
You're welcome, thanks for coming.
here. Yeah, you're welcome.
We've been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah.
Me too, man, me too.
It's been a while in the works, but shall we jump straight into it?
Straight in. No warm up.
No warm-up, no.
Right.
I was going to say Burback's the wrong phrase. What am I thinking of?
Yeah, not bareback. It's a little bit too early in the relationship.
You want to check out the Oddcast? If you go to, you're on Stitcher, iTunes?
Yeah, Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, TuneIn, and Podcast Addict.
Yeah.
So far, that's the only ones I'm on. Yeah.
I like what you're doing. I'm really enjoying them.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much.
You sort of, each podcast sort of tends to be focused on one subject. And I like the way you've got a good mix. Like you generally start with a series of clips, like background clips. And then you bring in your own opinions plus references from books and excerpts from books and news articles and website links. It's really cool.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I've been blogging back in, a little bit like on social media for 20 years, like, since MySpace. And I just kind of, people kept telling me, you need to start a podcast. And I'm like, nobody's going to want to listen to me. I'm a hillbilly, as you can tell by the way I talk. But I don't know, man. I finally just said, to hell with it. I'll try it. And I like to do things like kind of keep it evergreen. I mean, sometimes I'll do topical stuff, but that's being done so much that I kind of like to keep it more in the vein of doing things like suppressed history and stuff like that, or just lesser known facts that people can go back anytime and listen to and kind of maybe take something from it that they can apply to their own journey. You know what I mean? Journey for information or whatever. Yeah.
I know what you mean about topical stuff. I mean, we tend to do it every other episode at the moment. We have a guest and then we tend to do more topical stuff. And you need to get it out quick. Otherwise it's sort of this, what they say over here is yesterday's news is tomorrow's fish wrapper. What you wrap your fish and chips in, because it's done and it's gone. It's constantly evolving.
Yeah, and so many people are doing it so quickly. I'm too lazy. They beat me to the punch, and and there's a lot better people to listen to than me. So I'm kind of like, well, I should probably just do what I know the best, But and right now, God, as you guys know, I mean, the information it's coming so fast and changing so quickly. It's like it's hard to keep up with. It gets overwhelming, because at this point, who the hell knows what's right?
Yeah. What you need is an army of producers doing most of the work for you.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
If someone's thought of that before. Maybe. Not sure.
I think so, probably.
You must... Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, you got all these celebrity infotainment figureheads now doing stuff from their homes. Yeah, it's pitiful, man. I tried to watch a couple of them, and it's just like, this is terrible. I'd rather watch myself, and that's pretty bad.
It sounds like you must have to do a lot of research. You must the amount of time you must have to put into each episode is pretty astronomical.
Yeah, I do, and each episode is different lengths. So, like, one show might be 30 minutes, one show might be an hour and a half. I don't know if that's good or bad. I just kind of go with it until I feel like, hey, this is enough, and I've said everything that I know as plainly as I can say it, and then I just stop there. But I feel like the last two episodes, I feel like maybe that's more the direction I want to go in. Is like one was called The Cult of Science, and I was just kind of looking into scientific fraud and different things like that with science. And then the newer one, I just went into kind of the money that goes into the cable news, mainly from the pharmaceutical companies, because it's just, they control a lot of our world with the knowledge and everything that people get. So I think doing stuff like that is more kind of the direction I want to go in, instead of so much political stuff, because it's kind of getting to the point where I feel like I've said so much about the political side of things. I just keep repeating myself, and I don't feel like I'm really doing a great job of getting through to people that way, because people are so kind of brainwashed by the politics. At least here, in the States, it's like people are just gone. They're for either of the two sides, and you can't really have much of a conversation with most people.
No, I think you figure out that the politics situation is so tribal. You're never going to convince people. You're never going to change people's minds. All you can do is put information out there, and that's all you can do.
Right? Yeah.
That's like a choice of two isn't really a choice, is it? To be honest with you.
No, and I try to tell people that, because the two here, they have a symbiotic relationship, because they play good cop, bad cop with the people, and a lot of them at the very top belong to the same clubs and societies and institutions, and like the Council on Foreign Relations and that type of thing. So it's kind of useless, it's like, I think they just kind of play off of each other, and most of the same things happen regardless of who's in charge, but they just have different approaches, and I think it's just political theater. A lot of what we see, most of what we see, I think, is political theater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
this sort of leads into this concept of the deep state, does it? In that the politicians come and go every 4 years or 5 years, depending on which country you live in, but that there's a background sort of administration working would you say in plain sight? But
yeah, I mean, I think so, because it's not like the news announces, well, so and so got appointed to this position and they are a member of Skull and Bones, or Council on Foreign Relations, or Trilateral Commission, or and it's like, when you start really looking into that stuff, so many of those people that have been appointed to high positions of power have been in those same groups, the same handful of groups for decades. And I think that's the conspiracy, that there is no conspiracy. You know what I mean? It's like they all have the same goals and points of view. Basically, they're all in there to kind of do the same things. And so it's not like this big secretive thing to them. They're just doing what they do. And the average people have no idea. I'm like, I'll mention the Council on Foreign Relations to somebody, and they act like I've got three heads, because it's like it means nothing. And I'm like, this is how your government works. This is what they mean by New World Order, because these people are in every administration. But, it seems like a conspiracy to them, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, one thing...
I think
go on, Ben.
Most of our leaders have probably been in the Scouts at some point. I don't think at that level of secret society.
Have you not heard of the Bullingdon Club, Ben?
Oh, the Bullingdon Club, yeah, of course.
Do you not think
that's the old Eton boys, isn't it?
Boris Johnson, David Cameron, George Osborne.
And also the like generational seats as well, like the nepotism. How many kind of people how many MPs have sons and cousins and nephews and all the rest of it are MPs as well?
Yeah.
Boris Johnson, for example, was he stand not an MP for a while?
His brother as well.
And his brother, and his sister done something, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think is it maybe, would you say, odd man, fucking hell, more extreme in the States, in that you have these dynastic families like the Clintons and Bushes?
Well, it seems that way, at least in the modern era, maybe. It's like the Bushes and the Clintons. That's our big ones in the modern era here. And so they were the two families that kept the public here split up and at each other's throats for several decades now. Come to find out, they're like best friends behind the scenes. George W. Bush calls Hillary his little sister.
Really?
Really?
Oh, yeah. And
that's something I've not heard.
Yeah, you can see quite a few pictures of them. But really what I thought was interesting, I didn't know this until a few years ago, the Clintons had the Bush connection come into play when they were still in Arkansas for the whole Iran-Contra deal. They were funneling money in through Arkansas. It was such a dead little town. It was the last place that anyone would suspect. So there's some really good, solid information about that. I know the website counterpunch.com, they've got some really good articles on that whole connection. And I'm sure there's been some books written about it, but I haven't really read any. But yeah, their relationship starts all the way back then, where they were funneling money from drugs through Arkansas, and they were getting that the money that that George H.W. Bush and company couldn't get approved of to fund the whole Iran-Contra deal. So those guys have been. I'm sorry.
Sorry. That was that after he was head of the CIA then, Bush?
That was, yes. Yeah, that was after CIA.
Right.
Yeah, right after, I believe.
Fuck. Yeah, most people don't, most people certainly in this country don't even know that George Bush Sr. was the head of the CIA.
Yeah, that guy was probably, in the modern era, the most powerful bureaucrat in our history, because he was head of CIA. He was an ambassador for the United Nations. He was also a CFR director. I think they have, if I remember correctly, they have something like, they have a chief and then they have several directors at one time. And so George H.W. Bush was also a director of the CFR, as well as Cheney. So those are three, really significant connections. And then a vice president and president, you can't get any higher than that here.
Yeah.
So
we could probably do a whole podcast on Dick Cheney.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm sure, there's a clip of him. I think you can still find it on YouTube, and he's actually giving a speech, and he's joking because he's in front of the Council on Foreign Relations. I think he was vice president at this time, but it might have even been after he was VP. And he's joking about how he was a director of the Council on Foreign Relations while he was running for whatever position he had before VP. And he's like, and the people didn't even know it. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, all those connections, kind of makes the whole thing go around. And I know that I haven't done a lot of research into it, but in your guys' neck of the woods, the Royal Institute of International Affairs was really before the Council on Foreign Relations, and they are all together. It's like the sister institute, or whatever you want to call it.
I'd never heard of that before you mentioned it on your podcast. That Royal Institute.
I need to look more into it. In fact, I've talked to another guy about doing a show about that. And I said, look, I don't know a lot about RIAA. Is that what it is? RIAA? RIAA, Institute of Internet. Yeah, RIAA. So anyway, I need to look more into that. But yeah.
Can you trace a lot of these organizations back to Cecil Rhodes?
Exactly. Yeah, those two especially, and I think the Trilateral Commission as well. But they came out of that whole Rhodes Roundtable. And then also, of course, the Rhodes Scholars. And if you start looking, that's a really good one. I'd like to do a show on that. It's just the Rhodes Scholars who've had high places or positions of power in U.S. government, and even the private sector as well, because obviously the government and the private sector, a lot of these huge companies work together. So, but yeah, I've got some books by a guy. He's a lesser known guy, and I don't know why he's lesser known, but his name's Dennis L. Cuddy, and he's written a whole series of books on the deep state and all those different groups that came out of the Cecil Rhodes era. Right. And man, he goes into detail because he takes a lot of the documents, declassified documents and official papers and stuff like that, and, copies them in his books. So it's like, it's not a conspiracy really. You just read there and you're like, well, this guy was Council on Foreign Relations, and this guy was a Rhodes Scholar, and this guy was a Rhodes Scholar. And if leading back to that, to the current crop of, or the latest crop of DNC candidates, you had Cory Booker, who was a Rhodes Scholar, Bud Guy, who was a Rhodes Scholar. You had Tulsi Gabbard was CFR.
Was she?
Bloomberg was, yeah. Let's see, Bloomberg was CFR, and I think Trilateral Commission. He's definitely been a Bilderberg attendee numerous times. And then there's Joe Biden, CFR, longtime CFR guy. Oh. So they've had their bases covered as far as that Rhodes Roundtable over there. And they're talking about this one chick, Stacey Abrams from Georgia. She's really wanting to be the VP. Yeah. And she's Council on Foreign Relations too. So it's crazy, man.
Just, I imagine a lot of people listening won't have heard of Cecil Rhodes or the Round Tables. Could you maybe go into a bit more depth about how that started, who this guy was?
Yeah, so he was a very wealthy diamond miner. He was originally funded by the Rothschilds, of course. He went over, there's always a connection, right? But he went over to Africa, to what became Rhodesia. I can't remember what it was called before he was there, but it was named after him. And from what I've read, the term blood diamonds came out of what he did was he didn't force the natives to work, but he barely paid them. And I'm sure it was really bad. And so they would work until they bled to get those diamonds out of those caves and under the ground. And he worked for De Beers Diamond Mining. And so he just became so rich. And he never got married, never had any children. And he made it his lifelong goal. He wanted to create these secret, I don't think he actually called them secret societies, but clubs, groups, whatever. And they first would have what they called the Rhodes Roundtable groups. And it was just these high society men of, wealth and fame that would get together and, whether it was a drinking club or whatever, I don't know, but they eventually got real serious about it. And in his last will and testament, he had this series of wills where he left all his money to his second in command, Lord Milner, who was appointed to make all these clubs. And they were very detailed. Like you can buy, there's a couple of books out there that is just his wills. I think there were 6 wills, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, he wrote in detail how to create these societies, what kind of people to choose as members, and how they would infiltrate high places of power in government and the private sector. And he said that he wanted to create a world government, and that it would be under British rule. And that was his whole thing. He said that the Brits were of a higher class than any other people, and he felt like they should take Africa, take back the United States and other places. So, and he was very open about it. And so, that was a long time ago. I think he started doing that in 1881 or something like that. And then he passed away maybe early 1900s, 1902, 1903. But even to this day, you see that here in the U.S., they still had, what did I say, 5, 6 different people out of the DNC candidates that were from those Rhodes roundtables. You had like before the Council on Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute of International Affairs, you had something he called the Society of Helpers. And there's not a lot known about those, but those were going to be your lower level people who were working to kind of help in the local communities and stuff like that. And then you had the Society of the Elect, which were the higher ups. And, you know, as crazy as it sounds like a conspiracy, but it's all true. You know, there's a lot of good books out there that have referenced it. Right.
And so what's the Rhodes Scholarship that you mentioned?
Well, you know, it's this prestigious scholarship for individuals. I think it's out of Yale, but I could be wrong about that. And they choose specific people. And of course, Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar. And if you go back and look at the book, Tragedy and Hope by Carroll Quigley, he was one of Bill Clinton's professors. He was a history professor, and he wrote that gigantic book about the Rhodes roundtables and that whole plan, to create all that. And so, he said that they control banking, large businesses. They want to merge government into this one world power. And, they kind of pick out these guys when they're young. They kind of see them maybe even in high school. I don't know if people are reporting that to certain people within those groups that, hey, we've got this one guy. But, you can go back and see there's a picture of Bill Clinton shaking JFK's hand when he's like 14. Some kind of meeting, Okay, maybe that's just a coincidence, but and then there's another picture of Bill Clinton, looks to be maybe 22, 23, sitting next to George H.W. Bush at some party with, I think, one of the media figures that used to be really popular, Mike Wallace. I think Chris Wallace from Fox is his son. And so they're all at this party together. It's like, I don't know, man. It seems like they look for these guys at a young age. Like Stacey Abrams, the chick I was saying that wants to be Joe's VP, she's one of those people.
Yeah.
I think that before she even got out of high school, I think she'd given a speech to at the Council on Foreign Relations, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Do you think she actually wants to be president? Because I'm not sure Joe's going to make it to November, to be fair.
I'm not sure if he's going to make it through this day. I can't see her being president because she's not very popular as far as I can tell. But, wow, if they ran her and Hillary maybe, or, gosh, I don't know.
You're still holding out. Well, not holding out, but you still envisage Hillary sweeping in.
People haven't. People keep talking about it. I have a hard time seeing it, but boy, it would be. I wouldn't put anything past her or Bill or that whole group of people. So it's hard to imagine. Like, do you guys think it's kind of hard to imagine what's going to happen after this election? Like, I can't even see what things are going to be like.
No,
it's hard to see past it.
Yeah,
like I guess because they put Joe up there, and it's so obvious that his health is he's not going to make
with it, is he?
Yeah, so. I don't know, man. It's really strange.
Did they do a number on Bernie again? Is that what happened?
Yeah, I didn't look too much into that, but he was doing great. And then I think they got to maybe it was the Iowa caucus, which is supposed to be so important here, I think. And then supposedly Biden won. But Bernie was killing it. It was like Trump last time. He was having thousands of people show up for his rallies and stuff. And I just smell a rat. They screwed him over last time. So I think he knew. I'm sure he knew he wasn't going to win this time.
Just
They probably said,
sorry, Adman. Just going back to the CFR and those other societies. Is there media figures involved in them as well, or is it mainly politics and to focus on the world government?
I would, there definitely is media figures. I would urge anyone who's interested, just go look on CFR.org and look at their current membership list. They update it every year, but over the years, the last probably 5 years or so, I went on there and I'll take a picture of the name and then post it up and show, once you find out someone's in there, you can usually find an article or two hidden away somewhere on the internet that talks about it. But yeah, a lot of higher up media figures that have been in the game a long time, they're in it. Andrea Mitchell, George Stephanopoulos, Aaron Burnett, a lot of the key higher ups are in it for sure, and a lot of military guys, a lot of generals and colonels, a lot of people from academia, and quite a few people from, like, I know I'm not sure if he was the head of HBO or the assistant. I think that he was the assistant CEO or something like that, but he was on the board of directors, the assistant CEO of HBO. And then if you look, HBO was doing documentaries for the CFR at one time. I don't know if they still are or not, but and then yes, mainly politicians and people who've been appointed to different positions in the U.S. government. So they've got a mix of all the really powerful people, but if you look at their corporate membership, it's like Walmart and Amazon and every gigantic corporati that exists here. It's like, so they have a lot of power. When you look at if it weren't for just the individual people, that's a lot of power, a lot of names in there that have a lot of sway and know a lot of things. But then you look at their corporate membership and it's like, wow, there's no need for a conspiracy just to look at their membership. It's like these people have, they can get shit done, basically. They've got connections, they've got money, they know people inside the government, and yeah.
Do you think is Bezos connected to any of this?
I'm sure he probably is. I don't know if he himself is like a single member, but of course Amazon is a corporate member,
right?
Which is even bigger. And then of course, I'm sure there's at least a couple of Washington Post people that are in the CFR. In fact, I'll tell you another really good, if it's still up, it's been up for years on a Washington Post website. And it was called Ruling Class Journalists. And it's one of the most honest pieces I've ever seen. I can't believe they actually did it. And I think it's from way back in like 1998, 1999. And they actually talk about media figures in the Council on Foreign Relations, which was interesting. I think they even implicate one of their own people in that article. So I would assume that, Bezos he's got power. I mean, if Amazon's a corporate member. And the weird thing is, too, about them, they claim that they're an anti-war institute. And that's one of the reasons that they push for this world government, because they want to end all wars. But if you really look at it, they actually promote a lot of wars. With like I know they were pissed when Trump decided not to just go full bore into Syria and blow the place up and rubbleize it. But if you look back at a lot of their articles, like there's a famous one called A Hard Road to New World Order. They're basically promoting war. And what they want to do, after just kind of reading their articles and stuff, is they mean to create order through chaos. So they want to push these foreign wars and these imperialistic type of measures to destabilize other countries, and that way they'll have more of a reason to have a world governing body, because this is the only thing that can stop these wars and these people who are these refugees and these people who are hungry and these people who are poor and this, that, and the other. So it's kind of like what was it? There was this guy, Harry Brown. He was a libertarian here. He's passed away now, but he said the government is good at doing one thing. They will break your legs and then give you a crutch. And that's kind of what they're doing. I think they want to cause destruction so they can rebuild a world in the image they want it to be like.
Wow.
The strategy, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. How does one thing that when you start looking at this subject, there's a handful of things that keep coming up. Like you said, the Council on Foreign Relations, Cecil Rhodes. Other things that you keep hearing are Agenda 21, Agenda 30. What's all that about?
Yeah, well, I actually took some notes about that down. I'd read about it. I'd actually done a couple podcasts that touched on that a while back. But so it's an action plan that was created. Well, it was implemented, drafted in 1992. They actually tried to push similar things before that, but it was at the Earth Summit in 1992, and George H.W. Bush signed the U.S. an agreement from the U.S. to go along with this action plan, and 178 other countries signed on as well. And then in the next year, when Clinton was in office, he created a Sustainable Development Council, and they have members of the Sierra Club and the World Wildlife Foundation and Enron and all these oil companies and stuff like that. As a lot of people who are pushing this are large corporations, and that sounds insane, but as far as I can tell, one, it makes them look good because, hey, we're green, we're doing things for the environment. But two, I think that the really large multinational corporations, I think they know that if there ever was a world government, they're going to have a high place in there, even though it's supposed to be this utopia and everybody's going to live happily ever after. We all know that there's going to be tiers and there's going to be rulers and different things like that. So I think that they know that they will have a high place if it's ever established. But it's crazy because it's not just on the national level, it's on the local level. They have these international councils on local environmental initiatives, and they are appointed to go to each little town and talk the leaders of that town into going along with this sustainable development. And, sustainable development sounds great, but then you really start to peel back the onion, and it's like they want to end private property. They want to end the Second Amendment here. That's one of their big things. But they say outright that private property is one of the biggest determinants of, they say it's one of the biggest reasons for inequality.
Right.
And, one could say, these, extremely wealthy people, and I'm kind of a free market guy. If there was a free market, I don't even think there really is, but if there was, but anyway, but that being said, I understand when there's people who are just so filthy rich that, you would think, well, seems like they could be more willing to help other people out who are less fortunate and whatnot. But, once you start getting rid of private property and you put property in the hands of, like, they claim it to be public property, which we will all own, right? No, that's not going to work. You take like the national parks here. The national parks are great. I like to go hiking, I like to go swimming and stuff like that. But you can only, like the citizens here and the people that visit, they can only travel on like 30% of that. And there's thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. And over time, through all these different green initiatives, they've commandeered like more and more property to now it's just an unbelievable amount of property they own. And a lot of these, I think they're called World Heritage Sites. I was at a place in North Carolina. It was a really beautiful place called Grandfather Mountain. It's on top of this huge mountain. It's like one of the highest peaks in that area. And then we went in the little lobby there in the gift shop and was looking in the museum, and I see this United Nations World Heritage Site. I'm like, what is that? Came home and looked, and it's like the United Nations through UNESCO actually has a big say in a lot of these places all around the world. And, if the shit was ever to hit the fan, they and whoever basically runs the United Nations would own those pieces of land. So
really, they would have ownership over it.
Does that sound a little bit like communism?
Yeah.
Is it, which is very strange to me, knowing the history behind, US and communism in the relatively near history.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I've really come to understand from reading like that Tragedy and Hope book, where the guy talks about how the Rose Roundtable groups were formed and everything. He says in there plainly, these guys like the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, they don't care if a country is communist, socialist, capitalist, fascist. The type of government doesn't matter to them whatsoever. They will use the system however they need to get what they want. And I think that, to me, communism and socialism has almost become meaningless here because it's been one of those divisive labels. Not that there isn't a system, called communism, of course, but it's like what people call free market capitalism here is not free market capitalism whatsoever. It's protectionism. It's like cronyism. And then what people call a lot of times communism or socialism is not really that, because if you look back, a lot of the communist countries were funded by these multinational corporations and these central banks and whatnot. So it kind of gets all, polluted there. It's kind of hard to say.
Yeah.
They really like to use those labels to keep us apart, though, to keep us divided.
As far as the crony capitalism, like examples we often see, it's like this sort of revolving door between government, regulators, and industry, and that where, and then an MP who's in charge of the environment, says the environment minister, and then he ends up, after he's retired, getting a non-exec job on the board of some oil company, and vice versa. It works both ways. Yeah, it's just plain to see.
Yeah, it really is. It's like I read this book. This guy Peter Schweitzer, I think he wrote a book called Clinton Cash, where he implicated the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation having ties to all these foreign governments and stuff like that. I never read that book, but I read this one. It was called Secret Empires. And man, that's a great book. He really goes in there. It's not just like a right-wing book. He implicates Republicans too. And he shows how the system, the way it works, is like a representative can't outright take money from a company or a foreign entity, but they can give his son, daughter, brother, sister, or even parents money or jobs or gifts. They can't give it to the representative or his spouse, his or her spouse, but they can do that. So that's how the whole thing works,
Well, that's,
and then also
I'm sorry. Go on. I was just going to say that's sort of quite topical in that there was rumors that Joe Biden might be in trouble because of his son, is it, Hunter, in Ukraine?
Yeah, that's a perfect example of that. Yeah, he had, I don't know a whole lot about it, but he had the rights to a mine there, I think a gold mine, if I'm not mistaken.
Wasn't a diamond mine.
Maybe it was that would be, that would be fitting. But yeah, and I may be wrong about that. It might be another type of business, but I start to get all these people mixed up. Like Hillary's brother got the rights to Haiti's biggest diamond mine after the whole Haitian was it the earthquake and the yeah. So he got rights to that, and a lot of people don't know that.
Fucking hell! Because
That's how
the Clinton Foundation was nuts deep in Haiti, weren't they? In the relief effort.
Right. I think the only person that was getting relief was Bill Clinton on the side. But they say, like, that there were thousands and thousands of dollars donated to Haiti, and there was only like 3 or 4 houses built, and people were still living in mud huts.
Yeah, it's a big thing, that, isn't it? I think there's billions gone in there, and it's all disappeared, isn't it?
Yeah, that's amazing.
There was a huge scandal over Haiti as well about the, allegedly members of the NGOs, sexually assaulting the women there.
Oxfam, wasn't it?
Was it Oxfam, that one?
There's a charity in the UK called Oxfam, isn't there? And basically they did an investigation and they'd set up like a brothel or something.
Oh, man.
And they were like getting hookers, but they were underage, and they weren't necessarily hookers. It was just basically like
exploitation.
Really, yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they were like kind of trading it as well for healthcare, things like that. And
I think they were. Yeah, I think they were restricting like the medication that they've been donated or whatever for sexual favors. I mean, it's just you just wonder what's going through these fucking people's heads, don't you?
Yeah.
The United Nations have had similar things happen with their peacekeepers. I know it. I'm going to do a show on that one of these days, but I know there's been at least a half a dozen incidents over the years where they found out their peacekeepers, they were sending them into these countries to help, and they were raping the women and sometimes the children. And, I'm surprised that there hasn't been a bigger deal about that too, but
yeah, that was
what can you do?
Wasn't that in Africa mainly?
Yeah, I know, mainly. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just one, it's like, I know it's happened several times in the last 20 years. So, you'd think, I mean, come on, they're there to help people, and then you're doing that kind of stuff. I mean, it's terrible, man.
Yeah. We need to go back to Agenda 21.
Yeah, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And Agenda 30 as well. Now, is this like a continuation? That's how I understand it, that Agenda 30 is some sort of continuation from Agenda 21.
Well, as I understand it, like Agenda 21 is really the agenda for the 21st century. So, and they wanted to have everything implemented by 2021 when it first came about. But, obviously that's not going to happen. But now they're kind of looking at 2030 as maybe having that will, give them time to get everything they need implemented.
Yeah.
And, it's all under, happy, feel good, clean environment, clean earth, peaceful, all these great things that when you're young, of course, that you'd be a moron if you didn't go for, but, they are not trustworthy but to do those things because they have other agendas. It's like they promise a utopia that's going to be, equality down the line for everyone, but they're not. I mean, you'd have to be a fool to believe that. And I got this book here. It's a 10-year-old book, and I just got it this weekend. I got it for the show, but I was hoping it would come earlier. But it's Behind the Green Mask.
Ah, wow.
And it's great. I mean, I really recommend it. I'm about halfway through it. And the lady that wrote it, Rosa Corey, she actually worked in California, and she was a real estate appraiser who specialized in eminent domain. So she was basically helping the government seize lands, basically. And while she was doing that, she thought she was doing a good thing somehow. She started seeing stuff about sustainable development in Agenda 21, and she started realizing, hey, they're taking people's lands, or they're making it to where they're passing such strict laws, like farmers, can't do things with their land, or people can't pass on the land to their relatives because they're making it so expensive, or whatever business they did have on that land, the way they changed the laws, they can no longer have that business, all kinds of different things. And the weird thing is, she's a Democrat and a lesbian, but she is like one of the biggest pushers against Agenda 21. She started a website called, I think it's called postsustainability.org, or I'm sorry, postsustainabilityinstitute.org. So you can find out a lot of information about Agenda 21 on there, really detailed stuff. But they want to build these smart cities. They want to get people out of any urban areas. They want to have these like multi-level apartments or condos and have stores underneath the actual apartments. And they want to get rid of cars. They want people biking, back and forth, which, I understand. I mean, I like to bike and whatnot, but, I don't want to be crammed into some area that I don't want to be in and be under surveillance 24/7 and not be able to fart without some person reporting it, So, yeah, they've got this all planned out, man. I mean, she details it in that book, and it just, the more and more I read, I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know if there's time to go back, because they are so organized on the local level all the way up to the national level to the world level, and they've got a lot of money behind them. And that's another thing that's disturbing that we were talking about earlier. There's all these NGOs like the Sierra Club, World Wildlife Foundation, and different ones who are pushing it and writing a lot of the legislation that's put forth before the UN that may or may not become acts or treaties or official agreements. And they're being funded by these gigantic philanthropy groups that are from, like the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, Carnegie Endowment, all these gigantic groups. And, it's just an odd pairing. You would think that those two wouldn't go together, but they do. And like I said, the only reason I can think that those groups would push that is because they know they'll be high up in the pecking order if this world governance is ever established.
Yeah, getting in and getting your influence in early.
Yeah.
What you're saying about the cars, I mean, like having a car, it's part of your independence, isn't it? And part of your freedom to travel.
Right, and where I live, like I live in the Tennessee, and it's like a lot of country area here, and if we hadn't had cars, we would never have been able to do anything, because we'd have to drive like 10, 20 miles to where there's anything fun, and I just can't imagine. I mean, it's insane, and to run everyone out of the rural areas, it's hard to imagine. But if they continue to, like they're actually advocating tearing down dams that have been built 50, 60 years ago, just because they say that those dams messed up the natural order of things. And so they need to tear those down. And it's really, as you would imagine, really big in California. Of course, now you have like a 60-year-old dam. The habitat's changed a long time ago, and if you were to disturb it, that's how you really mess up things now, because things have healed themselves or whatever. So,
yeah, but the other thing, that's pretty counterintuitive, isn't it, in terms of hydroelectric power? And if they're all about sort of carbon-free or low carbon kind of energy and things like that, then actually putting those kinds of things down is a bit of a backward step for their agenda, would you say?
I think so too. Yeah, I really do. They're really, there's more. I wish I could remember. There's another group who's really fighting this whole thing, and they're with the farming, the farmers and those types of people who've been told that they can't do certain things on their lands And some of the things that you look at, some of the regulations and stuff that they put forth is just, they don't even make sense. And if they keep making things harder and harder, I think eventually, they're working towards their goal, and it's happening little by little. And I think a lot of people don't even know because it's not advertised, it's not talked about very much.
Yeah. And I guess climate change is sort of the big motivator for this, is it? Yeah,
absolutely. Another group that's really pushing it too, I probably should mention, is the Club of Rome. And they've been at it a long time. They're really big in the United Nations. And they even said, I wish I had the quote before me, but this was like a 30-year-old quote where they were at some kind of, they have these big meetings, kind of like the meetings of Davos and all that, where all these big wigs get together from around the world and fly the huge jets in there to talk about pollution and stuff.
Yeah.
But they were saying that something like climate change, they didn't use that term though, would be a good way to get their agenda done. And I guess they said environmental reasons. And that was so long ago that they've really come a long way of getting that agenda done.
Yeah, it ticks all the boxes, doesn't it, climate change, for what they seem to want to achieve.
It sure does.
And it's a climate crisis now, of course.
Right.
Well, this is it. This is where your media members of the CFR and whatnot, you get to influence, you get to change the language that's used and change the message. Because, 99% of people just watch the 6 o'clock news, or they read a certain paper every day, and they don't go looking for this information, do they?
No. And, that's one thing that gets on my nerves. A lot of people talk about fake news, but then it seems like they still get a lot of their news from the fake news, corporations. And it's like, I don't know. It's like our world, especially if you're older, it's almost like your whole worldview as far as politics goes has been built by the corporate media. What you didn't learn in school is basically been taught to you by corporate media. And you try to point out certain things to people, and they act like you're insane. And you're like, but you talk about the fake news all the time. Why do you still believe all this crap?
Yeah.
I don't know.
What?
I'm sorry.
No, go on.
In this book here, Behind the Green Mask, she had this quote, and I'm a terrible reader, but I thought it was pretty amazing because it sounds a lot like what's going on with this whole coronavirus. But she's talking about the Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, and she said this plan is a whole life plan. It involves the educational system, the energy market, the transportation system, the governmental system, the healthcare system, food production, and more. It is a plan to inventory and control all of the natural resources, means of production, and human beings in the world. The plan is to restrict your choices, limit your funds, narrow your freedoms, and take away your voice. One of the ways is by using the Delphi technique. And that's a manufactured system. It's like the Rand Corporation came up with this thing called the Delphi technique. And it's all these statistics and different techniques to make large crowds feel as though they've chosen something that the elites have actually come up with. So the way they present it to crowds, they make them think it was their ideas.
Like an illusion of free choice.
Exactly, yeah. So that's the technique they're using with this whole Agenda 21 climate change type thing.
Wow.
And, they're starting kind of indoctrinating the kids from the time they're just, in kindergarten. So...
Yeah, I mean, young people are far more likely to be, far more likely to have anxiety over things like climate change than people in their 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just look at Greta.
Yeah.
Christ.
yeah, I kind of feel sorry for her, but yeah, I mean, she's it's a fundamentalist type of, it's a cult, green cult, you know.
You could make a case for child abuse for Greta.
Yeah. Right.
You know, what is she, 14, 15 or something when she burst onto the scene?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and she's been thrust into the spotlight of the entire world. And it's not her, it's the people behind her who are pushing it.
Right, yeah. The dad and mom and whoever else is behind, I'm sure there's lots of
there was a famous there is a handler, isn't there? A youngish female. I can't remember what she was linked to, but there's shady shit going on behind Greta.
I saw a post, and I did read it all the way through to find out if it was true or not. But it had a picture of her and the lady you're talking about, and it said she was a Rothschild. So, and like I said, I haven't fact checked that, but wouldn't surprise me.
What do you make of the current situation with the virus?
I've went back and forth on it. So my wife's a nurse practitioner in oncology, and so I try to take her advice and see what she says and what her colleagues say and stuff like that. And she pretty much thinks it's mostly bullshit.
Really?
Well, here in this area, we've barely had any cases. And she works at the largest hospital here and in the area, and they've barely seen any cases whatsoever. And she just said the masks, her and her colleagues think is absolutely ridiculous wearing the masks because the virus is smaller than what the mask will filter out. And so and I have my best friend's a nurse as well. I've been friends with him since we were tiny children. So, and he feels the same way. He's like, this is some sort of appeasement for the people, the mask. It makes them feel better. And it's a way to further divide the people, because I haven't worn a mask the whole time. When I go to the store, it's mixed here. It's half and half because there's a lot of people that haven't really went for it. And I'm not going to make fun of anybody who's wearing one. I'm just saying, it's become a way to divide people, and people really look at you weird if you're not wearing one.
Social shaming.
Right. And meanwhile, the people that are wearing them are constantly touching their face or pulling it down. I'll see people pull it down under their nose. I'm like, what's the point? And like my wife says, people have these gloves on and they're touching everything and they're not washing their hands nearly as much as they were if they didn't have gloves on. And they still feel like they're not spreading germs. And it's just, I don't know. It's a psyop, man.
It's completely baffling to me because there's this huge continuum. You've got people who accept all elements of the official line. It came out of the wet market in Wuhan and spread, as we're told by the BBC, and the cases are the cases, whatever. And then there's a whole spectrum of opinions all the way to it's 5G antennas killing us, and it's it's like where's the truth in it all?
I honestly I'm kind of going a little strong at it, but I do have my doubts about like my wife kind of thinks it's a different strain of the flu. And places like New York, in other areas here seem to have been hit really hard. But then other areas haven't had hardly anything. And I understand, like, if it's a congested area with a lot of people, you're going to have more sickness. But right off the bat, I mean, they didn't waste any time with the first stimulus bill. They had that thing, like, passed within just a few days. And it was like, I can't remember now, maybe 1,400 pages or something like that. and there's no way they had time to draft that. So I feel like no matter what happened in what the origins are, the elites and the governments of the world jumped on it quick and immediately started to use it to their advantage to try to, suppress people and get what they want.
Don't let a good crisis go to waste. That was Winston Churchill, wasn't it?
Yeah, attributed to.
I think so.
Attributed to. Not confirmed.
Not confirmed. Can't confirm nor deny.
He was a cagey one. It's like the more I read, about him, I'm like, I don't think he was quite the guy that I thought that I was taught in school. I mean, he's getting good and bad.
Yeah.
just like a lot of the past leaders.
Mm-hmm. I found it. We were celebrating VE Day recently, Victory in Europe Day. I don't know if it's a big deal in the States or not.
No.
But it's the 75th anniversary it was of Victory in Europe Day from 1945. And I found it quite surreal in that, we're commemorating this event that happened over 6 years where hundreds of thousands of Brits, but millions of people across the world died to fight for our freedom. And we're celebrating it locked in our own homes, waving flags about, and not allowed to go out. I just sort of thought it was quite surreal.
Someone's laughing very hard, aren't they? Somewhere.
Watching
it all.
I don't know.
Some kingpin.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask as well, what's it like in terms of being locked down where you are in America?
Well, here it's a more rural area. We're the third largest city in Tennessee, so it's not like it's a tiny area, but I live kind of out in the suburbs, and but honestly, I can be downtown in like 7 or 8 minutes if traffic's not bad, and it's half and half. It's like I would go to the grocery store or like the hardware store, Lowe's or something like that. During this whole time, it has been packed. People have been, so I couldn't even tell if I was just going to those places. I couldn't even tell there was a problem. But if I drove out a little bit further to others, I saw a lot of stores closed and stuff like that. And it seems like we're a college town, so there is quite a few, a pretty large progressive population here. But then there's also a large redneck population as well. So it's kind of right down the middle. I mean, there's been a lot of places closed, but a lot of places have tried to open or are pushing to open. We have this mayor here who was a professional wrestler. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, right? The WWE, he was a guy named Kane.
Right, yeah.
Kane, yeah.
Yeah,
So red and black face makeup. Yeah.
Right. So he's our mayor, and he was an outspoken libertarian, which I was really surprised that he got voted in because, like I said, it's kind of half and half, but we did have a progressive mayor who was pretty popular. But anyway, yeah, he was right off the bat. He's like, we need to open up as soon as possible. We need to, keep these businesses from failing and whatnot. And oh my gosh, I would go on any local group like on Facebook or something like that, and it was just like, he wants to kill us all. He's a murderer. It's all these. It's just crazy. It's just
the counter argument, isn't it? I think even Trump said it himself, was that if you shut things down, obviously that causes a recession. And recessions normally mean job losses. Job losses normally mean that people start to make bad choices. So they find sort of solace in,
alcohol,
substance abuse, things like that. And the death rate goes up from that, essentially. So, the cure is sometimes just as bad as the remedy or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the sort of the negative consequences, isn't it, of shutting everything down. Yeah, it stops sort of the spread of the virus, but there's all the other consequences of that, which is inevitably a recession, inevitably some people are going to lose their jobs, and then that causes all of the other negative consequences, doesn't it? I suppose.
Also loss of life as well, because like we've seen in this country, things like cancer referrals were cancelled. People were afraid. People were afraid to come to the hospital. Yeah, it was multifaceted. Yeah, operations cancelled. People were having, heart attacks and not going to the hospital, and strokes, and every other element of the health system had a downturn. And these consequences are going to come back to bite us in the ass, aren't they, further down the line? Yeah. So I think you're right on that. What I found weird this week is it almost seems as though the government's the job the government have done in instilling fear in us has backfired, in that they want to open back up and we're too afraid to.
Nobody wants to.
The teachers' unions have come out this week saying we don't want to open schools and all the rest of it.
I think that where we live, they have sort of councils and stuff, and they run the schools. So I think it's Liverpool Council and Manchester, Greater Manchester, are saying they're not going to open, apparently.
Going against the government. Our government said they want to open schools at the beginning of June, start a phased reopening of schools, and the teachers' unions have all kicked off.
Yeah,
don't want to.
Well, here a lot of people are getting more money from unemployment than they were working. And so, they definitely don't want to go back to work. I can't blame them. In one sense, I can't blame them for that. But I'm convinced that, and like I said, no matter what the origins of this were, I'm convinced this was the push. This is the beginning of the universal basic income here. I don't believe that, because the Republicans are spineless, basically. Besides Trump, you got a couple of guys that'll stand up every now and then, and like Rand Paul and Thomas Massey. But most of the other people are just spineless, and they just kind of like, okay, they'll kind of say a few things like they're going to go against something or it's not a good idea, but then they don't stand up for it when they really counts. And I just feel like they'll eventually give in to it. They won't call it the universal basic income. They'll call it something else, and they'll eventually give into it. And then probably with the universal healthcare, whatever you want to call it. So I feel like this is, no matter what, I feel like this is the beginning of a lot of things that the Republicans have been fighting against for a long time. And they don't really seem to be fighting against it anymore. And, if they do, they're just going to get called heartless or, whatever. So I don't see them winning this one. And, I've got mixed feelings about it, because I know that people need help, and I'm not against that at all. But I'm also not for, I think that people don't realize that, well, when you're dependent on a government, dependency is the opposite of freedom. And, if we really, cherish our freedom and individual liberty, then, you have to suffer a little bit and stand up for what's right, or what you think's right. And, I don't even see the people, not just the politicians, but I don't see the actual people on the right really here standing up the way they used to, even for stuff like the Second Amendment. It's changed. Something's changed. I don't know if it's like they're so busy, kind of caught up in the whole, I call it a political soap opera, but the fighting between Trump and the Democrats or Trump and the left-wing media. And they just don't pay attention to a lot of things they used to, like debt used to be a huge thing for the Republicans that they said they stood against, or government growth, or standing up for the Second Amendment, stuff like that. But it's not the way it used to be.
And the thing is, these rights and freedoms are very hard won, and and it can be easily taken away if you're not vigilant. Look at what's happened to us in the last 8 weeks. We've all our rights and freedoms have been stripped away at the stroke of a pen. And it's very strange times.
Yeah, and it's like as soon as all this started happening, well, then you look in the background there, and you have here you have Lindsey Graham in a bipartisan-led effort to enact this thing called the Earn It Act, which would end all encryption on all of your smart devices. And I looked into that act, and it would give our government the ability to every email you would send out, or potentially even text message if they get what they want in the bill. And it would go through the software, and the software would filter it for certain words. And they say that they're doing it to end child trafficking. But you know that something like that is a slippery slope, that they're not going to just stop right there.
No.
You know, and then at the same time, they have this bill that they're trying to get pushed called it's HR 5717, and it's like it's a gun bill, and it's like the most restrictive gun bill ever put forth, and nobody's really talking about it, and it's kind of been on the back burner for the last few weeks because of the coronavirus, but it's still in play.
Well, at a time like this, it's a great time to sneak through legislation under the radar, isn't it?
Absolutely.
People's eyes are off the ball.
Right.
And would that be based on is the rationale that it's down to these school shootings?
Well, yeah, that's definitely what's pushed it the last few years. Yeah, for sure. That's given credence for them to do that, and it's also, I think, one of the bigger reasons why the Republicans aren't really protecting that amendment any longer like they used to. And honestly, I think regular people, just the regular voters and regular people on that side, they just don't think about it. They don't realize that all those things are happening. They don't realize that your rights are under assault. Like they were really vigilant under Obama. It's so easy to be vigilant when you have an enemy who's the face of the country talking all the time. And but then when they're not in charge and some of your own group is actually in on taking some of your rights, it's like people aren't as vigilant.
Yeah, people often they'll support legislation when it's their guy in power, and they forget that, once you've granted this power, it's only a matter of time before someone's in that position who you don't agree with, and then that can be abused.
Yeah, and that's really I hate to say that term again, slippery slope, but that's what it is. And it's been happening now for so long here and I guess around the world. And it's like we forget immediately about that vigilance and that, skepticism when our guys get in charge, and we just lay down our swords, and it's like, no. You need to be eternally vigilant if you're, because no matter what, even if you have the best representative ever, he's surrounded by other people who have other intentions. He could be getting bad advice. He could be fooled, and he's not going to be in power forever. No. Just like you said. So,
freedom of speech is another big issue, because I'd heard that you'd been the victim of censorship. Yeah. I've been blocked on, or not really blocked, but I had a YouTube page. My channel was taken down like a couple of years ago. I wasn't really given a good reason for it. I didn't have anything offensive on it, nothing violent or racist or anything like that. And then my blog was taken down too, and I couldn't figure it out. Like, I mainly just had stuff about chemtrails and stuff like that on there. So, yeah. I noticed. I was just gonna say, I noticed two pretty popular alternative sites had been censored over the weekend. Tinfoil Hat, the Tinfoil Hat podcast. Really?
They lost their Twitter and their YouTube.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. And somebody else, I can't remember who the other person was. But it was pretty big in the alternative community.
Because that's quite a, well-known, successful podcast, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
It's not like the, trying to shut down little old Amish Inquisition, is it?
Right.
Yeah, I've been shut down, haven't we?
Have we?
Only because we played it fast and loose with copyright laws.
Oh, yeah, we did get a cease and desist or something. Yeah.
Oh, well.
It just goes to shows how much power these big platforms have, doesn't it? Like YouTube and Facebook, in controlling the message.
Yeah, they really do. They're kind of like the new Ministry of Information or whatever you want to call it. I mean, and with Facebook, I think it was kind of baked into the cake because I don't know if you guys have ever looked into it, the LifeLog program that DARPA had here, but it was basically Facebook for that agency. They would take all of our information and log it down, and it was just a couple of days before Facebook was implemented. They supposedly discontinued the LifeLog program.
Wow.
And so if you look at the description of it, it sounds just like Facebook. I mean, it sounds just like it.
So in other words, the social network's bullshit. Zuckerberg works for DARPA.
Yeah. I wouldn't doubt it, man. That guy have you seen him lately? It's like his eyes are like that big. He looks like I don't know, like a robot or
I was
something.
just going to say, I think he might be a DARPA robot.
I think you're right. Yeah.
He could have had the tap on the shoulder at Harvard. That's what could happen, isn't it? He's been recruited.
Very well could have been, for sure.
Did he go to Harvard? So?
Never watched whatever it's called, Social Network? It's like a documentary, isn't it?
Well, that is the perfect. I mean, if you think about it, how else would the intelligence agencies and whatnot get all the information from what we like to eat to what kind of girls we like, to our politics, to our you name it. They know every little thing about us, and there's no other way they could do it except to trick us into doing it willingly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you look back at Zbigniew Brzezinski. I think it was one of his. I think it was called the Technological Society or something like that. And I think it was like 1980 when he wrote that book. And he said that in the next few years, the government would have the ability to know every little thing about people, and that people would be willing to give up that information. And, I don't know, it sounds like social media to me. I mean, he went into more details than that, but it's just amazing that we really have no privacy rights anymore, or very few.
And we volunteered them. I remember being maybe a teenager when mobile phones first started becoming affordable, and people started having them. You didn't used to have to wind them up, right? Like carry it in a suitcase. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to have one of them. I don't want anyone being able to ring me wherever I am. That's an awful idea. Fast forward 10 years, and I don't know anyone who doesn't have a mobile phone.
Right.
No.
It's strange.
And also the tracking software as well. Like
Google Maps.
Well, yeah, basically. But the app they're pushing out now.
Oh, the Corona.
Yeah. And tapping into that kind of the Android software and whatever it is that Apple use.
Now,
I remember what it is.
Was this what South Korea used?
Possibly. I don't know.
Right. But our health service is apparently developing an app that you're going to download onto your phone, and it uses Bluetooth to talk to other phones. And if someone gets a positive test for coronavirus, it then sends a Bluetooth message to some database somewhere. And so it alerts everyone who you've been within 2 meters of for a certain duration of time to, self-isolate. But it's pretty terrifying, isn't it? I don't know how I feel about that app.
No.
Yeah. They're doing that here too.
Really?
Or they're trying to. It's like a HR 6666. A lot of people are kind of weirded out by all those sixes here, but and then if you look back into one of Bill Gates' vaccine patents has 3 6s in it, and then there's something called the luciferase. It's like has something to do with one of the vaccines he's pushing and stuff. It's like, okay, it sounds stupid, but it's starting to get a little bit scary, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, they want the ability to. They're going to have like these people. I think it's 10 people to every one nurse they will work with a nurse, and they will go out, and they're called contact tracers, and they'll go out and talk to people if you've had the virus. Try to find all the people you've been around, and I guess it just continued that process, and then report back to the nurse, and you will have to isolate. And if you don't isolate, well, I don't know what happens because it's not specific. If you refuse to isolate, it does not say. But supposedly, if you have no place to isolate away from other people, then they will give you a place, which sounds really scary to me.
FEMA camps.
Right. We've got this large plastic box for you.
A black helicopter lands in your back garden.
Right. But yeah, that's, again, another one of those things that has so much potential for abuse. And, you know, gosh, I don't know. I mean, so many things are linked, but like, it's hard to imagine them not abusing that tracking capability, you know?
Yeah, it's very hard to get powers away from governments. This is what a lot of people don't realize. It's easy for them to, you know, it's mission creep, isn't it? And
Yeah.
actually removing powers from government is nigh on impossible.
Yeah, and you know, people act like, you know how it is. It's like, oh, our government or our leaders would never do that to us. And it's like, have you not read history? I mean, people have been saying that since the beginning of time. Oh, they'll never do that to us. And then you see all the things that's happened over and over and over. You're like, are you crazy? These are do-gooders. Who knows who they're loyal to? I can't remember if I mentioned, I don't think I mentioned earlier, but I'd read a while back, a couple of years ago, that in the States here, it's actually legal for our representatives to be dual citizens of other countries if the other countries allow it as well. And they don't have to disclose that to the voters, to the citizens.
Right.
So who knows who these people are loyal to, you know? We have no way of knowing.
Is Trump a dual Russian citizen then?
It could be. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. And you mix that with that book I was talking about, how he explained how the representatives' family members can be basically bought off. I mean, who knows who these people are loyal to?
There was a story, I don't know if you've heard anything about it, but this Obamagate hashtag has blown up in the last few days. Have you looked into that at all?
You know, I haven't looked much into that. You know, I don't know. I mean, nothing would surprise me coming out of that because, again, I mean, I don't trust any of them. And, you know, the way he came in so quickly. He was kind of pushed by Oprah Winfrey, and that kind of started him off. But I remember the WikiLeaks, when he first got into office, put out how his cabinet was picked by Citibank. And they actually pulled the emails from the Citibank president who was telling Barack who he needed to pick for his cabinet, and they picked almost the identical people. There was just a couple people that are different.
Bloody hell.
So that whole thing kind of started out shady, and just, you know, that's another one. Who knows who he was loyal to?
Yeah, I'll have to wait for it in the memoirs.
Right. And coming out of Chicago, too, that's one of the most corrupt cities, or cities in our country, with mob connections and just a slew of politicians who've been arrested. And, you know, it's kind of like a good old boys network there. So I assume that, you know, when he got into office, that he had a lot of bad connections.
It's an interesting situation in America because you have this completely different constitution to us. You have this federal system and then the states, and the states have a lot of power when it comes to regulation and law enforcement and all the rest. So has there been a lot of kickback from individual states who don't want to apply the federal rules, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, it seems like there has been like certain governors and even local mayors and stuff have kind of went against, some of the things that the federal government wanted to implement or did implement, and of course a lot of the people too. And that is a unique situation. Like even when we were trying to ratify the Constitution, there was this group of guys called the Anti-Federalists, and they were like, hell no, this Constitution is going to take away too many rights from the states and do all of this, that, and the other. And they're like, you're crazy, And it's like going back and reading the things that they wrote was like, wow, they were actually right in most cases, because the Fed has so much power, they just keep usurping more and more power. And some of these, and one of the worst things here too is we have some of the worst representatives, yet the people continue to vote them in time and time again, even though they have a terrible approval rating, because of the only having the two-party system. They think it's the lesser of two evils. So
yeah.
They just keep voting in those same people.
Yeah, it's an illusion of choice again, isn't it? And divide and rule and all the rest of it. I mean, there must be some good people that get to that level, though. Do you not think? People who are there with honest intentions and actually want to do a good job for people.
I think so. But I'd say, it's like getting into the swamp or whatever you want to call it. It's like fighting against all those other people. Like, I think I like Rand Paul. I don't always agree with him, but I respect him for at least standing up, against a lot of things. Thomas Massey is another one. I like Justin Amash, but I don't know. He decided to run for president for the Libertarians and then dropped out 2 weeks later. I don't even
had a phone call.
It's really strict. Yeah, I think you're right. That's just my first thought was, because he was making a lot of headway and getting a lot of attention. He probably was told to knock it off.
They sent that DARPA robot Zuckerberg around to his house, maybe.
Right.
Have a word.
Well, look at Rand. Somebody pointed out that, so he's kind of one of the few that kind of has stood out against some of the things that the status quo wanted. He was nearly shot at that softball game a few years ago where one of the representatives was shot. He was there too, was nearly hit. His neighbor attacked him while he was mowing his yard. And I didn't realize it was as bad as it was, but he said that he tested positive for the coronavirus, and he said the reason he decided to get tested is because he had to remove part of his lung from that attack. So, and then he gets positive for coronavirus. So it's like there's one guy who stood up against the system, and it almost got killed twice.
Two to the head.
Right. And then this Massey guy, he stood up when we passed the stimulus, right before they passed that last stimulus bill, and he tried to make the representatives come back and do a physical vote, because that was the biggest stimulus that had ever been passed. And if they didn't come in, then they didn't even have to put their names in to show what they voted for.
Right.
So it was unconstitutional, and that's why he tried to push for them to do that. And now they hate him. His own party hates him. And Liz Cheney is supporting the person who's running against him in his Senate seat for re-election. So it's like, stand up against the system, and then you get...
Yeah, I mean, if there's no record of what way you voted, how on earth are you supposed to hold these people accountable?
Exactly. It was kind of unprecedented, and, I mean... they barely come into work anyway. So, the least they could have done was come in and vote for that huge bill. And I think this other bill that they have up, it's like, I think the $6 trillion maybe. So from what I've read, I think it passed the Senate but didn't pass the House. So not everyone even has to vote on it. I don't understand how that works, but
now is this the there was a conspiracy theory that I got hip to about the coronavirus, some new coronavirus HR bill, and they showed that it had been started or first brought to the attention of their House in like January 2019.
Really? Wow.
Now there was a mundane reason for this. It was a way of speeding up the process. So they took, I think, I'm probably wrong, but the legislation has to go through the Senate first before it goes to the House. Is that right?
I think I should know this. I think that's the way it goes.
And so to speed up the process, they took a bill that had already been through the Senate and then just stripped out all the text and put in this new coronavirus text, so that it speed its way through and get through the House. So there was quite a mundane sort of reason for it, but that sort of, I think that maybe was what you were thinking about, the same bill, I think.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, they've been doing those kind of things for a long time, like, like Nancy Pelosi said a few years ago, we got to pass the bill so we can see what's in it. Again, I think it was Rand Paul and maybe another guy. A couple different times they've tried to put forth legislation that would make it to where our representatives would have to read bills before they vote on them. So they would get them and have like 2 to 3 weeks to read them instead of like 2 days before. And our representatives won't give that any support. So they don't even want to be accountable, you know?
No, it's such a dangerous game, being accountable, isn't it?
Right.
I want to avoid that.
Right.
Avoid that like the plague.
And they get these bills are like 1,500, 1,800 pages, and pass them within 2 days. They haven't read any of it. Maybe the first 2 or 3 pages, and that's it.
Jeez Louise. Oh dear. Well, on that note, it's 10 o'clock. Shall we?
That's a good ending.
Yeah. Shall we wrap up on that note? Thanks for coming, Odd Man. It's been great to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had a great time. I appreciate you guys having me, and it's been cool.
Cool. You're more than welcome. Don't forget, Eavesdroppers, check out the Oddcast featuring the Odd Man Out. Scroll down to the episode description and you'll find all the links, and we'll put your social media links and all the rest of it down there. So go and find him. And your Instagram's really good. You're very active.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I spend too much time on there. The podcast would be better if I spent less time on Instagram, for sure.
Okay, we're going to sign off. Stay on the line for us, Odd Man. And
yeah, man.
We'll see you next week. All right. Take care of yourselves.
See you later.
Wakanda forever.
Yeah.
The Dwarf, the Cripple, and the Mother of Madness.